Time to talk back and Android. And don't worry, it's okay, Shaun. It's not that you and I are going to do this. We are going to bring in an expert. An expert.
On Double Tap, are you sure?
Well, I know. It's since this whole YouTube thing, It seems to have gone up a gear. They want like experts and they want people on cameras, blind people on cameras. I mean, for goodness sake, let's bring in John Dyer. He's a TalkBack expert. That's what I'm calling him. John, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
I'm good. I hear you've just started listening to Double Tap. That's okay.
Mm-hmm. No, I had to get caught up on the recent events, so I'm glad your dog is recovering.
Thank you. Oh, very good. Very
well
good.
done.
Very good.
That's
very
proof.
good. The dog is absolutely fine.
I had to prove it, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's the marker.
Only a true listener would know this, right?
It's like the West Wing episode when he has to say shibboleth, or otherwise nothing will, no man shall pass, or whatever the line was. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Anyway, John, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on. And we're going to talk about TalkBack 15. Now, we did talk about it last week, of course, on our Monday episode. That was following the news that TalkBack 15 is rolling out. I still haven't got it here, but this is a slow rollout, and people are a bit concerned about this. But you can explain this to people, right? This is something that rolls out over a period of time by Google.
Yeah, it can take up to 2 weeks. I guess their concern is if something goes horribly wrong and everybody loses speech, they can save half of them, right? So I guess that's why it rolls out slowly. I wish it was just, like Apple does it. Of course, Apple doesn't roll out VoiceOver through the store, but if they did, everybody would get it on the same day because that's how iOS works, right? But it's a little bit different in Android land.
So tell us about TalkBack 15 and what's new. I mean, I know the headline feature. We've talked about it, and you can maybe give us a bit more detail on that. The headline feature, of course, being the news that you can get image descriptions through Google Gemini. So essentially fusing the Gemini assistant into TalkBack. Now, that's a pretty cool feature. And have you had a chance to play with it and try it?
Yeah, so the way it works is in the same way you would use an app like Be My AI, Be My Eyes, to describe a photo, you can just have TalkBack from within itself describe whatever's within the focus. So it doesn't even have to be a photo. It could be a drop-down menu that's not being accessible on a website. It could be, a button. It could be text, anything. Whatever's in focus, you can either bring up the TalkBack menu to hit describe image, or you can assign a gesture to describe image. And when you do that gesture, it will take a partial screenshot, I guess, of whatever's within that focus, send it to the Gemini servers, and you'll get back a description of what that is.
Oh, right. I was thinking it was just purely for images, but no, that takes it to a whole new level, right?
Because it doesn't make everything completely accessible, right? Because there's some apps that are just so bad you can't even get things in focus, right? But if you can get something in focus, you can get a description of it, which is awesome.
And how do you enact it? How do you get it to work? Does it automatically do it, or do you have to swipe it and choose it, or do a gesture or something?
So you can tap with 3 fingers or do the old-fashioned angle gesture of swiping down then to the right to bring up the TalkBack menu. And it's the first, they've moved it. It used to be way down in the menu. Now it's the first item in the menu. So it'll say describe image, and you just double tap on that. If you prefer, you can go into the settings and customize your gestures to assign it to a specific gesture. So I just have it set to a 2-finger tap for me. So that's all I have to do to describe anything at any point, yeah.
And is it limited to just what's in focus, or can you do the entire screenshot of the entire screen?
You cannot do from within TalkBack, you can't do the entire screen, but if you do have Gemini on the phone, you can ask Gemini anything about the current screen. So although that's not within TalkBack, you do have that functionality. Or you could just take a screenshot and... Well, this is how I used to do it. This is why I love this feature so much, because I used to just have to take a screenshot of the entire screen, share that screenshot with something like Be My Eyes, and then try to figure things out from there. This is much easier than that, but you still have that option if you want to get the entire screen.
And I haven't really played with Gemini much at all. What's the description like? If you compare it, I think we've all got sort of the benchmark of Be My AI, which gives a really good detailed description. What's it like compared?
It's very similar. I mean, I took a picture of my wife and son in a restaurant, and it described them, their expressions, their hair color, what was on the table, what kind of food was there. It even does, and I'm not a fan of this, it will comment on, the mood of the restaurant, or so, the stuff that's not details, but you know how these AI things are.
Yes.
And at this point, it doesn't seem to be tailored because, for example, if you're going to have Be My AI describe you something, the description is going to be more based on somebody who's visually impaired than if you sent that directly to ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, it seems like in this first iteration, there's really no difference. It's going to comment on the mood of the picture. It's going to, I was looking at a Mario Kart playset on Amazon, and it for whatever reason, after the description, told me this would be a great gift for any fan of the Mario franchise.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah. Wow.
I didn't need that information, but
Did you buy
everything else was great.
By now? Yeah, but that's, to be fair, I mean, Be My Eyes have put a lot of work into getting that tone right of who it's aimed for. Because if you ask the same question, as you say, to ChatGPT, it's all about the tuning of the prompts and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But can you interrogate it further? I mean, like Be My AI? I know we keep saying like Be My AI, and I don't mean to do that, but this is the benchmark. It seems we're kind of basing all this on. Can you interrogate
at this point,
further?
no, you can't, because I'm a little disappointed because the way old descriptions used to work is it would just say it to you, right?
Yeah.
Now it pops up a window, and the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, it's popping up a window to tell me this, so there must be an edit box I can ask a question, but no, there's not an edit box right now. Hopefully that's something they're planning on adding in the future, because that would make it great, especially because if you want the exact text out of something, it does that AI thing where it just summarizes it, and it says, if there's too much text, it says this is about the following subject, and it just kind of picks and chooses what it wants to tell you. Similar to what Shaun mentioned last week about his, I think it was last week, about the Meta AI. Like he wanted to, or the Meta glasses, he wanted to read everything on the menu, and it was just summarizing, the menu. So it sort of does that right now. You can't get it to give you the text exactly. So I would imagine if there was a prompt, you could say, just tell me the text.
So I guess my question is, would you still rather send the image to Be My AI rather than using Gemini?
It depends on the situation, really. Yeah.
Because I suppose it's like you've got this great app there that can do it, but you have to, you have to share that image with it. In some cases, that can be quite tricky to do. I mean, it could be a screenshot. That's one way of doing it. But essentially, you have to go out of the app you're in, go to another app, import the image, all that stuff. And these are time-consuming activities, right? If you just want to know what
I think
the description is.
For my workflow, it's been about, I'd say probably 90% of the time, I just do it in TalkBack. If I know I'm going to want to ask something specific, I won't bother with TalkBack because I've kind of gotten used to what the description is going to be like. It's awesome in certain situations, right? But if I want to ask, if I know I'm going to need specific information, I will still use Be My AI for that.
It would be cool, I guess, if it just sent it straight over to the Gemini app and opened it as a already asked question, so you could follow on.
Yep.
Maybe that's something that'll come. Yeah.
Hopefully.
So, just detaching Gemini from TalkBack for a second, have you played much with it? Getting a sense of how it works and how it behaves?
I'm kind of forcing myself to.
Don't force yourself.
Yeah, because Google's doing this thing where they want Gemini to replace Google Assistant, but in its current iteration, it can't do everything Google Assistant can do. So I've been reluctant to jump over to it, but within the past month or so, I've just replaced Google Assistant and I've gotten used to using Gemini. So I mean, it is helpful for just information. If you just want information, obviously, always double check the work because these things can hallucinate all the time. So, but it is, if you just want to know something really quickly, it's awesome. That's what I use it for mostly. Yeah.
And how about TalkBack itself? TalkBack 15 specifically. So we know this is the feature that everyone's talking about, but what else has impressed you or stood out to you?
To be quite honest, nothing.
Okay.
So TalkBack...
It's been great talking to you, John.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll tell you what's new. This is normal with TalkBack. They do not... I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. I don't think they have the manpower behind TalkBack that Apple has behind VoiceOver. You're not going to see... I mean, they've caught up in recent years, right? But you're not going to see as many features added in any given release. And part of that is they have usually 3 releases a year. It's not like an annual thing. But so what's new in this one is you have... So this has been kind of controversial. It just changes. Like, it used to be if you wanted to read continuously, you would have to... When you invoked continuous reading, it would read from the next item instead of the current item. That's changed. Most people, I think, are on board with that change. They like it reading from the current item first rather than the next item, even though we've been forced to do it the other way for forever. There's a couple new gestures with Braille on-screen keyboards or Braille displays for, editing gesture, like to be able to select specific... You had selection control before, but specifically now you can select from your current cursor point to the beginning or to the end. That's what's new. There are new Braille display commands that I honestly don't know anything about because I don't have a Braille display.
Yeah.
And then there's more granular control over punctuation. It used to be on and off. Now you can set it to all, most, or some. So, just minor improvements like that. That's all I can think of off the top of my head.
I was telling you the other day, Stephen, that I feel almost like I need to learn and start again with Android and TalkBack because of these new gestures. You mentioned that, changing granularity, and there's all these, multi-finger gestures now, right? 3-finger swipe up and down. Does that change granularity or change options, and then left and right, and the 3-finger tap to bring up the TalkBack menu? I'm still using the angular gestures every time I pick up an Android phone because I'm stuck back in the past, really. And it feels like I don't know, like I need a refresher, like I need reprogramming almost to
He definitely does, John. He definitely does.
Yeah,
in every sense.
What's happened over the years is, if you want to call it copying, fine, or if you want to call it like helping iOS users to transition over to Android,
That's a good spin.
They have added features from VoiceOver. So they added the multi-finger gestures originally, and this was just an Android problem because Android had so many different devices. Some were very cheap and didn't even have multi-tap functionality, and if they did have multi-touch, it was only 2-finger touch. So for the longest time, that's why we had angular gestures, because that was the best way to do multiple things on a screen where some devices just couldn't sense multiple fingers at one time. But that was a long time ago. So they have, I think it was in Android 11, so probably TalkBack 9.1 or 9.2, they added multi-finger gestures, and a lot of the gestures are similar to what you would find in VoiceOver. They're not by default. Most of them are not similar. So if you want to make it an Apple experience, you could assign swipe down with 3 fingers to go to the next page. You could assign swipe up with 3 fingers previous page, that sort of thing. But you don't have to use the angle gestures if you don't want to. I'm glad they're still there because I use them all the time and I love them. But I also love having multi-finger gestures. It's just more possibilities to customize.
But I must admit, I think the point that Shaun's making is the one that I was thinking about as well, which is that it almost felt like this was an old way of doing it, that somehow this has been superseded and we should know this. And yes, there are other gestures that have been added. But what you're saying is that those angular gestures are still very common, still used, and still promoted to some degree. I mean, they're clearly still there and functional. I think they're brilliant. I mean, I actually really like the angular gestures because it adds. At first, I remember the very first time I tried them, I could not get my head around it at all.
Our memories up, down, left, and right.
And you'd swipe down and then you go left, and then that does. It didn't make sense. But then eventually, when I got it, I'm like, this is the only way I'm ever going to use an Android phone now because I love it. But you mentioned something else about being able to change things. One thing that has matured massively in Android is the customization. You've got so much more in TalkBack now that you can do. You always could in Android more generally, but in TalkBack, you have got much more now in terms of customization of gestures, even going to, the Braille display, and even a Bluetooth keyboard or a wired keyboard if you wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I'm glad that it's customizable because I think Samsung's voice assistant, what they used prior to TalkBack, was not customizable. Like, you couldn't assign the gestures to do what you wanted. So it's definitely something I like. I don't think TalkBack is as feature rich or customizable as VoiceOver is. I feel like they have it backwards. Like, I feel TalkBack has more of an iOS feel to it than and I think VoiceOver has more of a Android feel to it. And what I mean by that is I feel like VoiceOver is more user customizable, and you have much more voices to choose from. You have, I mean, someone told me recently, I don't know if this is in the beta or something, but you could have an equalizer for how you want the voice to sound. That just seems like so unnecessary. Like that's something Android would do. Just throw in features because you can.
So true. Yeah.
So they feel backwards from each other to me. I don't think. I mean, I'm happy with what TalkBack can do, but VoiceOver I feel like can do a lot more.
So interesting you say that, because we're constantly saying that there's a maturity between them both, and they almost feel like they're on a par. But it's so interesting to see someone who uses Android day in, day out actually point out those differences there, because it could be important, right? When I'm thinking about the customization of a screen reader on a mobile device, I'm thinking about changing voice settings per app, depending on what app's up, custom gestures and assigning them to specific features or actions. Those are the important things to me. And I assumed that they were there already baked into TalkBack, at least those two, which I consider the major customizations.
Yeah, and that's a good example, because TalkBack, you can't customize things per app. It's just however you set it, that's how it's going to be.
System-wide.
Mm-hmm.
But it does feel like all that will come, doesn't it? I mean, this is clearly an evolving screen reader. And look, I don't know about you. I personally wouldn't care either way if Google, as in Android and TalkBack in particular, almost copied VoiceOver and VoiceOver copied TalkBack, because there are benefits to both. Like, I would love angular gestures on my iPhone. You would like perhaps settings and more voices on Android. Okay, let's just make it happen. I mean, why does it have to be a competition? Well, look, I mean, I've had time and spent quite a lot of time with Google's head of accessibility and Apple's head of accessibility, and on both occasions they say the same thing, which is, look, we just get along here. There's really no competition as far as we're concerned. Around certain features,
they're not going to sue each other over patents for accessibility features.
No,
you would hope,
and that's
right?
a good thing. Yeah. That's a good thing, because look, for us, it's a basic level of access. So making this more accessible, so someone can make a decision. Hey, the new iPhone's too expensive. I can't afford it. I'm not buying it. I'm going to buy a cheaper Android phone because I feel I can get lots of cool stuff over there. And then when they do open up their Android phone, they find the same experience, as a blind user that a sighted person would. I mean, to me, that's, when you think about it in that sense, you tap the screen and an app opens up. The same thing should happen on both phones. Now, I know it does, but what I mean is that ultimately you want to have a mirror, essentially, of access for abled people as much as disabled people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maybe TalkBack will get there someday. TalkBack development seems a lot slower than VoiceOver development for whatever reason. I mean, they don't even have an open beta. It's a closed beta for people in just the US, Canada, and the UK. Like, you can't just get into the beta and start providing feedback in the same way you can on iOS. So
at least there's a group you can join. Just saying, there's a way you can get involved with the Trusted Tester program with Google that you can't do with Apple. That's sadly something that isn't open. at all. So, we just have to wait for the beta to come along and then feedback as best we can before the release happens. So, I'm not suggesting for a second that Apple don't have blind people testing this. I know they employed blind people and they are testing with those people and others as well. They are doing it more in-house with their own team. And that's because Apple has that traditional, don't tell a soul anything until it's time to tell people thing, which is fine, although I don't love that aspect of Apple. But it seems with Google, they're more open to saying, look, let's open this up. Let's look outside of our bubble here and actually talk to blind people and get feedback. And when you tell me, but I would imagine when a new version of TalkBack comes out, we're not looking at as many bugs as we might see with iOS 18 coming up, for example. I mean, you tell me. Maybe I'm being fanciful here.
There are bugs, yeah. There are bugs.
What's so interesting to me in this conversation, it's almost the grass is greener. I'm looking at Android thinking, I bet that hasn't got as many bugs, and it seems to get updated more than VoiceOver does. And you're saying the same thing back to me, John.
You notice the bugs you have to deal with, right? Every day. So
yeah.
And I'm that way with everything. I want a Pixel, then I get a Pixel, then I want to go back to my Samsung phone, then I go back to my. You're right. The grass is greener.
Do you want to weigh in this Samsung story? Because we were talking last week, of course. We had Michel Raman from Android Authority on the show talking about reporting he had been doing on Samsung not getting TalkBack 15. And we've had a couple of comments from people who I don't think have listened to the full story that Michel put forward to us, suggesting this was nonsense. In fact, yes, of course, you can get Android Accessibility Suite on Google or a Samsung phone, which is true, but you can't seem to be able to enable TalkBack without doing some kind of fancy developer command stuff in the background. First off, is that your experience? Is that true?
I would say most of what he said in that interview is true. The only thing that he might have been mistaken about is the fact that you can't have both versions functioning on a Samsung phone, because I have them both on my Samsung phone. I have one shortcut assigned to turn on Google's version and turn it off, and then I have another one assigned to turn on Samsung's version and turn it off. But what's true is that you can't get it to that point without connecting it to a computer and using Android Debug Bridge, developer software, basically, to get rid of Samsung's TalkBack, or Google's TalkBack won't show up in the settings to enable. That's basically what it boils down to.
Okay, yeah, which is what he was saying. You need to go into basically the ADB developer box and do it that way. But so how have you got it running simultaneously, or you're able to choose between which one?
Yeah, because once you get rid of Samsung's, Google's will show up in the accessibility settings. You can then assign it to an accessibility shortcut, which the iOS equivalent would be like assigning it to a triple tap of the side key, right?
Yeah.
And once it's assigned there, you could turn it on and off, and you can download Samsung's TalkBack from the Galaxy Store and reinstall it, and then you'll have both. Okay. And you don't really need to get into TalkBack settings through the accessibility settings, because you can, as long as you have it running, which you could turn on by the shortcut, you can then bring up the TalkBack menu, go to TalkBack settings there, and customize everything from within there. You don't really need to get to the accessibility settings. So you can get them both running, but you have to remove Samsung's to initially get Google's running.
And you simply just can't, uninstall the app through the default way you would.
Right. That's why you need to use the Android Debug Bridge. Yeah.
So why is that though? Why are they specifically
sort of jumping on you on this one? Why is this, John? Tell us.
So what's happening is Samsung's. So just to give a little history, Samsung used to have their own screen reader called Voice Assistant. And back in the day, you could choose to use Voice Assistant from the Galaxy Store, or you could choose to use TalkBack from the Play Store, and you could switch back and forth between the two. But ever since they did this merging of screen readers, Samsung has insisted on using their own version of TalkBack. And what it is they take Google's version and they add fixes to it. So They don't necessarily add their own features, but they just make it work better on their devices. I'll give you a couple of examples. If you're using Google's version of TalkBack and you try to use Bixby, that's Samsung's assistant. You press and hold the side key, and as soon as the mic opens up, if you have audio ducking enabled, TalkBack kind of interrupts it and Bixby stops listening. So you can't really use Bixby with audio ducking enabled. So that's something Samsung has fixed so that you can use Bixby. Another example would be the Samsung Galaxy Flip, the phone that folds shut and it has a little cover screen. Well, that cover screen it's its own little UI basically, and TalkBack kind of works with it, Google's TalkBack. So you can swipe between items, you can double tap on things and all that. But if you want to bring up the TalkBack menu, the menu won't appear on that screen. If you want to hide the screen, which equivalent to the screen curtain in iOS, you can do the gesture and it'll say screen hidden, but the cover screen, it doesn't hide. It stays wide open for everyone to see. But what is hidden is the main screen. And Google doesn't have a folding device of this form factor like a Flip. They have a Fold, one that opens up into like a tablet, but they don't have one that folds down into a
clamshell,
device
basically.
With basically a custom UI that has a custom UI on it. So Samsung wants to make sure these things are working on their device, and it comes with a cost, because they won't get the features right away. It takes Samsung, unlike Google, Samsung takes the iOS route and they release with the operating system. So you have to wait till you get the next version of Samsung's One UI before you get the next version of their TalkBack. So they might release like 3 versions year round. So they're usually at least 4 months behind as far as features. So I would imagine possibly by the end of the year, but maybe in the spring, Samsung will have these Gemini features baked into their version of Samsung's TalkBack. I wish they made it a little easier. Like, I wish you could just download TalkBack and they just said, are you sure you want to use Google's TalkBack instead of Samsung's TalkBack? So if you want the new features because this is Android, right? We want a choice. Like, this is why we're on Android.
Exactly.
If we want to choose new features over stability, give us that option. So
I've got to ask you, John. So when you're turning on TalkBack using Google's Android TalkBack on your Samsung phone, are you noticing anything that isn't working properly? Are you noticing anything that essentially would be working properly if you were using Samsung's version of TalkBack?
Only stuff related to Samsung's software. So like I mentioned, the Bixby has issues. The cover screen doesn't fully work correctly. But as far as like any of the features that Google has baked in, like Gemini works perfectly fine on the Samsung phone. It doesn't care what phone it's on. It will, if I do the gesture, it will send that portion of my screen to Gemini's server. So it will come back. It will tell me the description. It works perfectly fine. So it's just device-specific things that I don't think either Samsung doesn't trust Google to fix before they release, or Google's not interested in fixing before they release, because I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but that's basically what it boils down to.
Listen, it's been great talking to you, John. Now, you're part of the Blind Android Users podcast, is that right? And on their website as well, you contribute there?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, which is blindandroidusers.com, you can listen to our episodes, see where to subscribe. You could also just search for Blind Android Users on any podcast player, even Apple Podcasts if you want.
That's ironic.
Yeah, it is. You can also go to that website to, join our community. We have a Telegram group, we have an email list and Facebook group. But our partners are a website called accessibleandroid.com. And what we're hoping is that they're going to be like the AppleVis of Android, because there really is no AppleVis of Android for Android at this point. And, it's a community where you can submit content. They have written reviews of apps and phones. They write articles about, accessibility news. So, and two of their editors are regulars on co-hosts on our podcast. So we kind of have a partnership with them. That's not our website exactly, but accessibleandroid.com. Definitely recommend you go check it out.
Yeah, I've looked for a long time for something like this, exactly for this reason, right? Because one of the benefits of AppleVis is that it encourages people who don't know about the operating system, who are new, to find out about things, to ask questions, to engage with a community that's thriving. And I do not believe for a second there is not a thriving Android community out there, but it's hard to find those people and find them in one place, and especially when you're starting out. And you often feel like if you can walk into the wrong place and suddenly end up asking questions to a bunch of serious people about this stuff, and they just don't want to know about you starting out in your journey and how does this gesture work and how do I do this. They're just not interested. You need a place where you can go that everybody's willing to contribute. AppleVis, of course, is one such place, but there needs to be an Android Viz. Absolutely, I'm all for it. There you go. That's the Stephen Scott seal of approval right there. And that is worth nothing. But listen, thank you so much, John, for coming on. People should definitely go check out the Blind Android Users podcast and accessibleandroid.com as well. Available on an internet near you. John Dyer, thank you so much for coming on today to Double Tap.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
It's
John.
been fun.
Now go tell the Android people that we're nice people, okay?
All right.
Hi guys, Stephen here. If you want more content like this, then all you have to do is like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to catch new episodes of Double Tap, you can do right here on YouTube every weekday from noon Eastern, or on AMI Audio across Canada, and of course, in your favourite podcast app as well. Thanks for watching.